Thank you everyone for joining, and keep joining us as we go. We are at 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's Tuesday. It's the middle of the day. We're all fresh to discuss real estate and why now? Why not sit on the fence? We're gonna start with introducing you guys, and I'm going to start with Zach. So we have Zach Lemaster here, seasoned real estate investor, the CEO of Rent to Retirement, licensed broker, and a very good partner of us at Lendai. We love working together. We have Mike and Leanne, Canadian loan brokers, investors, clients. They have the Real Talk show on YouTube, and they have a lot of knowledge to share with you guys today. Thank you, Mike and Leanne, for joining us. And of course, last but not least, we have Lauren Cohen, another very valuable and a super partner for Lendai community, a cross-border lawyer, a realtor, an investor, and a connector, and the Canadian whisperer for the Canadians in the audience. I see we have in the audience, we have attendees from Australia, we have Israel over here, we have lots of Canadians on the call, we have some Americans, and so I would like to first and foremost raise a toast. It's 2023. Zach, you have something over there?
Water? I didn't come prepared, but in spirit,
in the spirit, exactly. So cheers. Anyway, the cameras are cutting. If we have the background, it's cutting our hands, so we have to do like this. Cheers to 2023. Here's another year of prosperous year of health and happiness and good, healthy business, and a lot of human material behind all that business that we do. We need a good, reliable human material, and we are people's people. So I feel like we have a good connection, and let's start. That was a good introduction over here. We're gonna start with the first question. With the structure is gonna work. Let me just, sorry, it's a new camera. The structure is going to be a question that's pointed to each one of you, and then I'm going to ask the other ones to follow up and give their input on the same subject. And we're just going to start, we're just going to dive in. I'm going to start with you, Zach, and I'm going to ask more on the real estate perspective, the investor perspective. How would you choose these days to enter a market from an investor point of view? And please give us the top 3 things that you're looking at.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the introduction. I just want to, for anyone that's unfamiliar with Rent to Retirement, just to give a quick overview. Our company is a turnkey provider. We're a turnkey company based in the United States. We work with international investors all over the world that want to invest in the United States. What we do is we identify the best markets, which we'll talk about that criteria, but we identify the best markets throughout the US to invest on based on a handful of criteria. We build our local teams and systems in these areas to offer turnkey investment opportunities for investors. What we talk about when we say turnkey, this is a property that's newly built or fully renovated, leased, and managed by our team in the market that we have confidence in, allowing you to invest from a distance with confidence that it's going to be a successful investment. We have single family, multifamily, commercial, new development, and new build opportunities, many of those that have significant immediate equity. So that's just a quick rundown on us. But as far as identifying the best location, the fundamentals of real estate have not changed. This is a good thing, the market cycle that we're in, because it's allowing better buying opportunities and better opportunities for an investor. And so it's a little bit more of an even playing field. And this is an exceptional opportunity to buy right, where you have not had the opportunity to do that over the past few years. So even while, interest rates are a little bit higher, sure, it is a great time to make sure your underwriting is solid at those higher interest rates. So in the future, if you do refi, the numbers are only going to get better. Plus, regardless of that, we know that rents are continually going up year after year. But the top 3 criteria is, and to that point, we want to be investing in areas that are in the path of progress. We want to be investing in areas that are having population and economic growth, especially in times like this, because that is where we know that we're going to still have appreciation, both in market value and rents. So the biggest things that we look for on a macroeconomic scale when we're determining a market is going to be population economic growth. Is it in the path of progress? I'm going to combine these. So favorable tax structure and landlord friendly legislation. And then we want to see, obviously the cash flow numbers need to make sense, right? We need to be in areas where you still get positive cash flow and the home prices are affordable compared to the rents to be able to do that. So I went off on a tangent, but I'll stop there.
No, yeah, that's these are good enough reasons to why to choose a market and how to go into a market for newbies, new investors that are coming without a lot of knowledge and obviously experience, and then so what to look for. I would agree on that. I always think that. In terms of, you've mentioned rates. So in terms of rates, we're not choosing a good investment based on where are the rates now. We more going to follow by the real estate itself. Rates, to be honest, it fluctuates, right? It could go here, it could go there, and we can refinance. And we're not. We had our Lendai promotion, the last one, with the famous caption of marry the investment and date the rate, right? So we are buying the real estate and we're marrying the investment, but the rate is something that changes, market changes, So I would ask Mike and Leanne if they have a follow-up on that. A newbie investor who doesn't have a lot of knowledge, experience, or the right team, where would he start? What would be your top 3?
So I always go back to the analogy when Zach mentioned earlier, it's a great time to buy. It was a couple days after Christmas, my kids were coming home with all kinds of bags, more clothes, it's on sale. Because of the rate environment, we always say properties are on sale right now. It seems like the only time people get scared of real estate is when it goes on sale or when there's price drops. That's some of the best opportunities, to start looking at real estate. But again, it's buying properly. And again, you talk about, marrying the property, but it's the rate that you date. So finding a property, a good price property, having a good solid, some kind of a spreadsheet, there's all different ones available out there to make sure that, that property is going to cash flow, whether when rates are, low, or when rates are high. If you're finding a property, when rates are on sale that barely cash flows, what's going to happen, like you say, and now in the environment we're in, when rates are a lot higher, you have to find those right properties. Like Zach mentioned, you have to make sure that the rent is going to support, that mortgage payment on that property. You really want to do your homework on, vacancy rates. The population of Florida and Texas are expanding hugely. Obviously there's traffic coming from somewhere. So you don't want to be buying in a state where everybody's leaving. You kind of want to be buying in a state where everybody's going, where that population growth is.
That's right. And again, the rates, people have short memory. They forget that, if they got in post-COVID at all-time low, that was, good times, right? I mean, everybody it felt like a party. But if we look at the history, let's take 25 years cycle. I think the average, what was it, mid fives for Americans investing in America. I'm not talking about the foreigners. I'm talking about Americans investing in America was mid fives, and then foreigners are always 1.5 higher than that. So whoever got in at that party time now is looking and saying, "Oh my God, we are at a we are at a higher rate environment." But if we look at a history of a real estate cycle, it is very close to average. Lauren, to conclude that question, your top three?
When those rates were super low, the prices were going super high. And it's usually like that, especially in Florida. So I have lived in Florida for oh my gosh, it'll be 22 years next month. God help me. And until probably the last 2 years, I had never seen the market shift up nearly like it did. I mean, I'm from Toronto, so of course I've experienced market adjustments most of my life. I mean, the market was always up, and then there was a dip, and my mom as a realtor when I was growing up would be like in a slight panic. I'd be like, it'll be a day or two. But here in Florida, we'd never seen the kind of increases and multiple offers and going way over asking, 100,000 over asking. It was unprecedented. And part of that was because the rates were low. The other part of that was, as Zach mentioned, that the influx of people into Florida was unbelievable. I mean, every day, even still, we see people coming in. My son is in a small private school, and our population increased by 50% during COVID because people could be remote. And they took advantage of it. And Canadians started coming in droves in a very big way, which was good for us, certainly able to help them. But the reality is that the rates being high, I currently am renting. I sold my house in June, and it makes me nuts every month. Like I'm like literally choke when I have to pay the rent because I'm not a renter. Okay, I did it so I could wait for the market to fluctuate. Well, the prices are going down and I know the rates are crazy. So what do? You buy, you get a mortgage, and then you refinance. That's what you do. So you have to play it. That doesn't mean that the opportunities aren't there. Like Mike said, when the prices are down, that's your real opportunity. And now is really the time when people are realizing they can't pay those price, that maybe the rates were low, but it doesn't mean that their mortgage amount each month is low, and suddenly they can't pay the price anymore. So there's opportunities for subject twos, there's opportunities for vendor financing, there's all kinds of opportunities that are really opening up in the market right now that I see not only in Florida, but in all the other states that we tend to focus in, Texas, Arizona, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, and other states as well. And that the key is that it's kind of like it said in our marketing materials, the best time to invest was yesterday. The next best time is today. But if you wait for tomorrow, it's going to be too late. So do it now.
Can I add one more thing on that real quick?
Sure.
Not to belabor this question, but we work with many investors that are new and savvy and experienced investors. I've been professionally investing for about 15 years myself, and through multiple market cycles. But what we find is that the experienced investor is absolutely being very aggressive right now, while the newer investor is concerned about the economy as a whole, about not looking at the fundamentals. They're looking at the investment portfolio, but in the lending environment and sitting on the fence. But the reality is that none of us are going to hold these loans for 30 years. People do not do that. It's an interesting dynamic in the States compared to Canada. As I sit in Canada with my wife's family now, looking, just discussing around the dinner table different rate options, like there is no such thing as a 30-year fixed rate in Canada, right?
That's
but
right.
the reality is that rates are temporary. It's just a number on a chart. You know, it's all about, if you're in the path of progress, your rents will go up consistently over time. The benefit to owning real estate is not timing the market, it's time in the market. You need to acquire your real estate and hold it for many years and let real estate do what it does over time, which is appreciate, let the rents go up, take the tax benefits and depreciation, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, I loved all these points.
Yes, I love it. Great feedback from all of you guys. And we're going to keep going to our second question, and that's going to be for Lauren. Let's talk a little bit in more depth regarding the structure and the Canadians going in. We've talked a lot about the double entity, how it's affecting Canadians, tax implications. Maybe you want to elaborate on the visa side a little bit and what you're doing in your business. So let's open up that topic a little bit, and I'm going to let, of course, the other panelists to react to that later.
Sure, thank you. So first, I want to be clear, because I got to do this, that I'm not giving legal advice or tax advice, definitely not tax advice. If there's one thing I never touch, it's taxes, I just pay them. So, and I use the same tax advisor that I recommend to most of my clients, just so you know, he's here in Boca, lives 10 minutes away from me, and we went to a Canada, Florida chamber event together last month. With that being said, way too many Canadians. I just had one yesterday that wrote to me on Facebook and said, I'm closing on a property tonight, so I can't join your webinar. I was like, oh, well, did you already set up your structure? No. Okay, and you're closing? Yeah. Okay, were you planning to set up the structure? Yes, that's why I reached out to you. Okay, now, you would think that's a panic situation, right? Because, oh my goodness, he's closing in his personal name or whatever he chose to use. It's not. The good thing is that even if you did that, we can fix it as long, and you may, if there's a capital gain, it's many years later, you may have to deal with that, but it's going to save you a lot of money. So the reality is, generally speaking, there is a two-entity structure for most Canadians. Why? Because, if I had $1 for every time a Canadian either does this or somebody tells them to do this, which is set up an LLC, because that'll protect you from legal liability. Guess what? An LLC, a limited liability company, is a disregarded entity by the CRA. So it doesn't do you any good to have that LLC. You're going to end up being subject to double taxation. By adding that second entity over the LLC, which is usually a limited partnership, you actually avoid that double taxation. So it's not complicated, it's relatively simple, but you need to do it with the right team. And the right team doesn't just mean going on some website and paying a few $100 to file the company. You need specific guidance. And when I say I don't give legal advice, generally it's a two-entity structure. For some, it may not be. And perhaps for people like Mike and Leanne that are investing in multiple states, you're going to need additional entities. Or if you're buying multiple properties, you don't want to necessarily put all of them into a single entity. So it's all about making sure that you take the right steps. And the first step in our process, other than an onboarding call, is to talk to the cross-border tax advisor, not a US tax advisor, not a Canadian tax advisor, a cross-border tax advisor that understands both Canada and the US, kind of like me. I'm a lawyer in both countries, right? So by having that special expertise, and listen, there's a reason that they have that level of education and experience. And, you know, it's not their first time, because you want somebody that really understands the nuances, because there are nuances, and even by state, and everything is different. So it's so important. And I love the fact that Lendai requires that you have an entity. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily mean that your entity is the right entity for you. So speak with somebody that really understands what is required, not only for you as an investor in US real estate, but as a citizen of wherever your home is, Australia, Israel, Canada, because there are different implications depending on where you're from.
And on a business perspective, I can say on behalf of Lendai, we're just looking at it as a business. There is a business. This business have an income. You hire property management. You have your business expenses. You have your business tax returns at the end of the year. And we have found that the best practice for our niche where we are, supporting foreign nationals all over the world. That's how we're gonna treat it. Conventional banks, bigger banks, would see that multiple structure, double entities, sometimes triple, sometimes they're holding a holding company in Canada or a trust in Australia. Shout out to Elizabeth. They're holding their trust, and that trust or a holding company is holding the two entities, the two US entities. And when it goes to the big banks, that's where they're saying, you know what, I don't know how to underwrite it. I'm not going to deal with it, especially not for a lower value property or a lower loan. This is too much for us. And this is where we shine. So Mike and Leanne, on that note, do you have anything to add on Lauren's points?
Yeah, I would say that Mike and I live on a border town. And I mean, prior to COVID, it was once a week. We were into the States, we traveled the States, we were quite familiar with the States. And so obviously that was an attraction for us to start investing into. And then it came to that we thought, oh, you know, the States is, you know, pretty much like Canada. But then we really started researching it and spoke with, we spoke with the international lawyer. Unfortunately, it wasn't Lauren at the time because we didn't know her at the time, but it was amazing on how much liability that we had if we were to do what Lauren said that many people do wrong and set your structure up wrong. So we would have exposed ourselves to a whole gamut of things that we thought we weren't even aware of. So I would say 100% make sure your structure is proper, like Lauren said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
So I just, you know, I mean, somebody in the US, they can come after, you know, when you buy in your personal name, it exposes all of your Canadian assets, you know what I mean? Our primary residence, all of our rental properties, all of that now gets exposed to if something happens in the US because we, you know, if we don't have that proper structure, if we're buying in our personal names. So, you know, people don't realize, oh, it's just one house over there. What's going on in Canada? All of that is now exposed and at risk.
And you have to remember the United States is the king of suing. So they'll sue for anything.
Yep.
The Lord just nods her head.
Yeah.
It's true though. It's a completely different mentality, and Canadians think that it's the same, and it's not. I mean, like I said, I've lived here for 22 years. I was a poli-sci major. I used to think, oh, no big deal. Maybe the accent is no big deal, at least not mine. But for the most part, it's not business as usual. And the sooner that you realize that, no matter where you're from, Israelis, you know, they can't take the same mentality and mindset to America and expect to do business the same way. It's just not the same. Same with South Americans. I mean, no matter where you're from, it's a different way of doing business here, sometimes state by state, but the different way of doing business extends to the way that you protect your assets, and real estate is a significant asset. So we have an asset protection attorney on our team, because at the end of the day, it's not just about whether the structure makes sense from a tax perspective and maybe legal liability from the perspective of somebody falling or something at your property, but what about how this impacts your assets wherever they are?
Valued information over here. And Zach, I'm going to let you conclude the question. I know we refer a lot to the Canadian side, but would you see just an investors in general, do you see them save on the pennies in the legal fees and the accounting fees, and then they fall into oh my God, where did all my money go? Where's my gains, right?
I mean, the last situation we want to see anyone in is a situation where a tenant, has an issue, and to everyone's point, I mean, all your liabilities are exposed, right? I mean, or you have a bad partnership that, or whatever the case is. The what ifs are endless, but the more important aspect is really when we talk about building a investment portfolio. Real estate investing, it's a lifelong journey. And this is a business. You need to approach like a business from the very beginning, regardless of where you reside in the world. But the point is that you need to be really successful in real estate investing, to create substantial passive income, to replace, to create generational wealth and a retirement picture to some degree, or supplemental income. If you want to make this sustainable, you need to build. I always talk about building your network of professionals, right? You need your professional advisors on the tax, legal, accounting, financing side, on the property management side, where we would fall in, and sourcing inventory. I mean, you need all these professionals that are going to be guiding you, because you don't know what you don't know. And often that is rather complicated when you're investing in multiple states, for that matter, and you're residing in a different state. So this is why it's so important. I think you picked all the key players here to have this webinar. This is great for someone that's just learning to break into the investing space. This is your team of professionals right here that can help you with every aspect of building a sustainable and successable model. You just need to be connecting with the right people from the beginning.
That's right. We're really trying to, I think all of us, trying to create that gate of professionals around our investors, and that goes back to the human material I was talking about. Many lenders will be interested in the real estate. That's the truth. That's the ugly truth of where I'm from and my field, right? So many lenders will try to get their investors to go on a default just because they want to take over the real estate. And so the human material and accountability and all that to support our clients at the end of the day. Last question, not last, but for that group of questions, we're going to end up with Mike and Leanne, and it's a fun question. I like that question. From your perspective, long-term rental, short-term rental, or both? I know what you're going to say.
I'm going to start it out, and then we're going to give a barrage of different questions that we would ask ourselves. But how we established it, Mike and I, is we actually established ourselves first in Ontario. So we had that comfort level of long-term in Ontario. And then we moved into Michigan, and we created a portfolio there that's long-term as well. And we created that comfort level. So they're more, they don't cash flow as much as obviously a good short-term rental, but it creates that consistent income month over month. Then when we ventured into short-term rental is when we burst into the Florida market. And that's where we said, now we have stability, because we all know short-term rentals can be volatile. So in the event that the short-term rental has, a couple bad dips, and then we come up and we have something to support it. So that was our mentality, but I'll let Mike go through a few questions that we kind of looked at.
Yeah. And when we have a client come to us who's asking, hey, I want to pull some money out, equity from a property, where should I invest? We'll go through things. Well, how much do you need? How many properties do you want? Do you want to be hands-on? Our long-term rentals, we have property management there, and we can be very hands-off. Our ones in Michigan, we might not hear from, our property manager. We get a monthly statement, everything's fantastic. We might not hear from them for 6 months. You know what I mean? That's great. Short-term rental side, we try to be hands-off, but you still are hands-on. We have a fantastic property manager there, but when you have 16 people, coming into your house for 4 or 5 days and then leaving, 18 people coming in next time, 10 people coming in next time, there's that constant. There's got to be, a little bit, you got a pool, you got 2 air conditioning units, you got HVAC, you got, cold, we had some cold weather in Florida. Hey, get a hold of you. Hey, what do you want to do with the pool? What do you want to do with this? That
It's a bigger
they're
game.
there, they're the boots on the ground, but they still need to involve you in some of those decisions. So that's really important. Hey, are you a buy it and let the PM company run it? Or you just want to sit there and watch the bank account, grow, or do you want to be involved in some of that? If your short-term rental has a slow month or 2 or 3, you know what I mean? How long would you be able to sustain it? So, a couple of questions. Leanne would have a few more of that.
We always say, and be aware of there's a lot of different expenses to a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, right? So furnishing the place. So we have a 6-bedroom, 6-bath home. Furnishing it, that's a big endeavor in itself. Extra utility costs, extra costs in wear and tear because of the frequency of the turnaround of it. And then really you have to really hone in that you might think everywhere accepts short-term rentals, but they don't. So knowing if the zoning is there for short-term rentals, you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah. And then, long-term rentals, ours, will we ever, want to use one of those long-term rentals? Maybe one of them will be our retirement plan, when we want to downsize or, once the kids are gone on, I want, one of my apartments so I can lock the door and leave. But we can't just jump into one of our long-term rentals whenever we want. But our short-term rental in Florida, we used it 5 times in 2020. Sorry, 2022. We were able to go down there 5 times, and a couple of them were organizing, but a couple of them we got to relax and enjoy it. Like, that's a fantastic option if you do have a short-term rental, if that's something you want to do.
And then to go on
champagne. Don't forget the champagne.
Yeah, I spilled champagne on Lauren.
And then the one last one that we wanted to actually bring up that Michal didn't bring up is midterm rentals. So there's actually short, long, and now the new trend is midterm rentals. Yeah,
and it's become really the beauty of a midterm rental is we've done a little bit of research on it. You can skirt a lot, especially in Ontario, a lot of the landlord tenant laws. Those don't apply. You have to watch how long your midterm rental is. And then also you can get around a lot of, we're not legal experts, but the zoning bylaws of certain communities, some communities are very against short-term rentals. But that midterm, it's a mix in the middle. It's a gray area for sure. Yeah. So what are these kind of midterm rentals kind of attracting? A lot of traveling nurses in the States. That's a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
Executives, large corporations bringing specialty workers in for short amounts of time, from other countries. Insurance claims, people have insurance claim. They're out of a house for a while. That's a different people waiting on a new construction that's run late, right? So there's a lot of different opportunities for a midterm rental too.
Golden, I like it. And I'm gonna shift the question to Zach. Running a property management on a bigger scale, where are you finding, I would say, the challenges? Would it be in the long term, where for Mike and Leanne, it worked very passively, shorter rentals, or the new trend, midterm rentals?
Yeah, and I think those were great questions to ask yourself, Mike and Leanne. I think this really boils down to coming up with a strategy and a plan, and then sticking to it. Where we see a lot of investors not be real successful is getting the shiny object syndrome, and they try too much and then they don't end up doing anything great. It is quite okay to diversify into multiple different strategies, but I think it's super important to just focus on one and choose it, and then just put your attention on that. I personally own all the above, and our business, while we mainly do long-term rentals, we also operate in the short and the midterm space. I personally really like the areas where you can have an opportunity to have all of those options on your rentals. I mean, a lot of places in Florida, especially like in the Panhandle around military bases, sometimes you can get this midterm rental that is, it's leased year round, but it's technically a midterm rental where you have people coming for training to that base consistently, and then they organize their own, tenant turns and things like this. But there's a lot to be aware of in terms of, to your question, on the the issues that we're seeing. I mean, all definitely, no doubt about it. Having a short-term rental is just way more potentially volatile and way more engaged, even if you have a property manager. I mean, that's why the managers charge like 25-30%, because it is a full-time job. And often that can be more volatile based on the local economy or what's going on as the economy as a whole. I personally love having a diversified portfolio. But that being said, our bread and butter is long-term rentals. We invest in areas that we try to set ourselves up for success, where there's consistently high rental demand and population growth, kind of like we talked about earlier. And that provides just real consistency. But some of those areas might perform well as a short-term rental. So I like doing all the above, but being hyper-focused on one strategy to begin with.
Right. So diversifying, but also start somewhere, see that it works, get your stability over there, and then you can keep going on new adventures. Lauren, you want to conclude that? Because I do have 2 more questions that I can jump to.
Well, so the trend here in Florida lately is for medium to long-term rentals, because more and more people are not buying homes like me and waiting for the market to adjust, or moving in from other places and not finding. There's not a lot of inventory still. So there were a couple of questions in the Q&A about visas. Now, if you're doing long-term rentals, you would need a lot of properties to be able to qualify for a visa. Now, when I say a lot, you're going to say, well, how many? So, and I bet you that Mike and Leanne and Michal can tell you my answer, because I'm a lawyer after all. And the answer is, it depends. And it does. It depends, because sometimes, like when Mike and Leanne are building this superhero oasis or have built in Orlando, has a lot of potential for other ways of getting a visa, which I'm not going to discuss on this call, but you can come to my masterclass and all of that fun stuff. But at the end of the day, the short-term rentals or the medium-term rentals that do require that more involved management are the ones that are going to potentially lead to a visa. So if there's a visa, even in your future at some point, then you need to consider not just long-term rentals unless you're doing huge volume, because the difference between a visa business and a non-visa business is the level of involvement. And my superpower, as they say, is turning that passive real estate investor, which all of us want to be, because we want to do this so we can have passive income, right? But if you want a visa, we have to turn that passive real estate investor into an active real estate business owner. And that means involving usually additional streams of income through multiple rentals per year and so on. Now, it could be that you add other streams of income as well, or you could have long-term rentals that have mixed use opportunities. So it's all about looking at each individual's goals and each individual property that you're investing in. There could be 40 flips a year, and maybe that could qualify. So it depends.
Great. Thank you for concluding that topic. Now we're going to go into a more open question. Let's give it not more than 5 minutes. And then Lendai, we're not a big believers in telling, what's going to happen in 2023. I have bad news for everyone. I don't know. I don't know what's going to come 2023.
I'm out. Gotta go now. You don't know.
I know. Let's turn off.
See you later.
That's it. It's the end of the webinar. We don't know, and we're not magicians, right? But we can throw some assumptions based on information that we read, that we educate ourselves. We see the trends. We follow the numbers. And so I'm gonna give it to Zach to tell us a little bit about what do you think that's gonna happen 2023.
Well, I do have a crystal ball, so I'm going to look into it briefly and tell everyone exactly what to do. But real estate is going to be real estate, and it's going to, it's going to continue. People are still going to need a place to live, right? And people are still going to travel, for that matter. And so I always like to go back to the fundamentals of investing, for cash flow. Obviously, have a strategy in place. I honestly think if I had to speculate, I would anticipate that these past 6 months are probably going to be some of the worst that we've seen. And I say worst being like the most volatile in terms of like rate fluctuation. I actually think the worst is behind us, and hopefully things will start to stabilize a little bit. And it's going to be more of a even playing field for buyers and sellers, where it was just absolutely insane over the past few years, where it was a very challenging time to come in and make good deals work on the buy side. So I think this is a great opportunity to build a portfolio, and to make sure your underwriting criteria is really refined, and to make some big moves over the next few years that are going to really determine the next 10 financially for you. So I would continue that. It's probably going to be a lot of the same that we've seen over the past few years or the past few months.
Right.
More of the same,
More
but
of the
lots of
same.
opportunity.
And Mike and Leanne, 2023.
I tell a lot of people that approach us, when they're looking at doing some refinancing or some coaching. I always say, are you looking at buying a house for 3 to 6 months? If you're looking at 3 to 6 months, it's very risky. Like Zach said, are you in it for the lifetime? We're long-term, real estate investors. We treat it like a business. We're buying a property right now. I'm not worried about what that house is worth in 6 months. I want to make sure that it's a good, solid property. I want to make sure that it's rentable. I want to make sure that I'm finding a good quality tenant, and I want to make sure that in 5 years or 10 years, I'm continually getting a mortgage pay down. And I think, if a house I buy today is worth less than, it's worth less than 15 years, I think we have bigger issues going on, worldwide. But, real estate, if you're buying for 6 months, yeah, it's risky. If you're buying, 15, 20, 30 for intergenerational wealth, now is a fantastic time to be buying.
And very similar to the stock market. If you're going to go in right now, any financial advisor will say the same. Look, for how long you're going to go in. If you're looking at a long term, then now is the right time. Of course, we're seeing much more volatility over there, and it's not as stable as real estate. But now is definitely the right time. We keep repeating that. I'm going to jump in because we're running short. I'm gonna tell the audience right now is your time to shine. Add your questions. I already got some sort of a summary from Miles. He kind of gathered all the questions together and put them into 3. Then I'm gonna pass it to each one of you. But before that, we kind of touched the subject of new investors versus seasoned investors that are already in the market. So talking about 2023 is, for whoever is already in the market, and that could be, influencing for them. But what is the top 3 for newbies? The priority, not in terms of investing, like I asked Zach in the beginning, but more of a general idea of newbies and new investors are going into the market right now, because right now it's the right time. Top 3. Who wants to start?
Are you asking top 3 pieces of advice for a newbie investor?
Let's say that the priority for new investors to look at. You've mentioned the growth of the area. Is it already appreciated, or there is so much more appreciation to go. And Amazon just opened a new plant in the neighborhood, and that's going to be bringing a lot of newcomers into the area, and just the top 3 in general in the big picture.
For me, I will say, and this is very broad, but just my advice on getting started if you're a newer investor, understand your strategy, be honest with yourself about your goals. So write this down, write down your strategy as far as what type of investor you want to be, determine location and team that you want to invest in, and don't have the limiting belief that you have to invest locally because that's all you know or feel comfortable with. Often we find the best opportunities not in your own backyard. You just have to have the right people in place to do that. So understand strategy, location, and team, and then understand any obstacles that are holding you back to be able to take action, and alleviate those. Set yourself a goal of buying your first property if you're financially capable in the next 90 days, because we know if you're a newer investor, that first property is less important financially, but most importantly, from mentally and emotionally, to get you on the track to be a long-term successful investor.
And Lauren, your top 3?
So it's hard for me to pick my top 3, but my number 1 would be to not do it without the right structure in place, no matter where you're from. And I agree with Zach that strategy, and it's always location when it comes to real estate. And don't be married to a location before you start looking at opportunities, because the opportunities might show up in a location that's completely different than where you actually think you may want to be. But when you do develop your strategy, determine if you want to potentially be able to stay there for part of the time of the year, like in a place like Orlando or South Florida, or most parts of Florida for that matter, where that may be a consideration. And if it is, then that will help determine if you want to do short, medium, or long term. And I would suggest having a strategy session with somebody that handles stuff like visas, and that, because then that will give you access to a social security number, which will give you access to US credit. So how much credit can you get? How is how are you capitalized and financed? And where does the Lendai come into the picture?
Okay, and Mike and Leanne will conclude, and then we'll move to some audience questions.
So I fully agree with exactly what Zach said. And to build more on that team is making sure you have every component of that team put together prior to moving ahead. So you have your lawyer, you have your accountant, you have, your PM company, you have all of that. And I also say, don't just all of a sudden say, hey, I found this accountant, he was the first one, seems good. Do your due diligence on your team. If you're a hiring manager, you would do interviews. You would, find the right person to be on your team. So that's the time to do that, and to make sure that team is together and knowledgeable. Like Lauren said, if you're doing cross-border, they have to be cross-border, right? The other thing is, to Zach's point as well, don't wait for the golden nugget. Don't wait for that perfect property, because I'll guarantee you, never going to find it. Never, ever going to find it. So take that risk, but make sure it's a calculated risk that makes sense.
Yeah, it's, we'll talk to clients all the time and, oh, what do you think of this one? What do you think of that one? Well, what do you think of this one? Well, you've just looked at 3, we'll call them silvers. Get into one 3 or 6 months later, that might look like gold. You know what I mean? But as long as you do that homework up front and make sure that it's a good buy, if you keep looking for that back, oh, maybe I'll check out this city, maybe I'll check out that town, maybe I'll check out over here. You're just going to keep continuing looking for something that's better and better and better. Buy something that's good and it'll turn better.
Don't get into analysis paralysis, right?
That's right. And so the fun part, Miles here conclude all the questions from the audience, or at least most of them. I'm gonna start with Zach, and then we're gonna move to Lauren, and then Mike and Leanne. So the first question that we're gonna put together few questions at the same, but let's start. Zach, you mentioned in the beginning to look for states that are legislation positive. Can you explain on this and provide examples? And maybe Mike and Leanne can follow on that, and related to Canada.
And I'll try to do a rapid fire answer since I know we're limited on time, but essentially it boils down to, especially on the managerial side, if you have a tenant that you need to evict, you don't want that to turn into a year process. You need to be able to get them out efficiently and effectively following the laws. You need to be able to protect yourself. What things can you charge back to the tenant if they're not paying, but it is their responsibility on the lease. We don't want to be in areas where there's rent control. We're starting to see that a lot more in the coastal areas that are a little bit more like on the liberal side, where there's rent coverages or caps. We want to be in areas where we can perform our business as owners.
That's right. And on the Lendai side, when we started to build our business, we first went to, what we call the landlord-friendly states. And that's very important to also opening your legal entity in those states, because if you're going to open your legal entity in a not friendly state, and invest in a property that it is in a landlord friendly state, then where is it going to fall down over there when something bad is going to happen, if it's going to happen? Are we going to go by obviously the legal regulations, whatnot of that state, or that not friendly state? So Lauren, you can elaborate on that. Your question. Thank you, Zach. Lauren, your question is, Lendai meets with clients that don't have a structure or various structures. Can you provide some insight on the steps to take, the timelines? Because we need to be very much correlated for those clients that don't have the structure. Now they need to open the structure. Now they need to wait for their EIN from the IRS. How long does it take? Should they start the lending part, the application with us, with no, with still waiting for the EIN? Or
I don't think they can. So I think that Lendai's requirement is that they have the entity and the EIN in place. From the perspective of looking at property and making offers, you're going to probably need at least some type of pre-approval letter in order to be able to qualify to look at these properties and make offers, unless you have cash and you're refinancing. In terms of timeline, so I did discuss the steps that basically for us, we do an onboarding call, then we do the cross-border tax advisor, and then we get the entity set up. And sometimes if we're in a rush, we can expedite that process. And you can potentially make initial offers and even close if you have the cash without the entities in place and assign them after the fact. That's not the way that we would recommend, but it is possible, and you can fix the challenges before they become tax challenges. So in terms of timeline, every state is different and it always changes. I would say at least 50% of our clients are investing in Florida, and Florida is the biggest fluctuation. It's been as long as 2 months and as short as 2 days. And what the beauty of working with our team is that if you do need a 2-entity structure, the first entity, the limited partnership, doesn't necessarily have to be in the same state as the limited liability company. So what we do is look at the states that are quick and less expensive and easy to process, so that we can get those entities set up as soon as possible and get you going. Now, you don't need necessarily the limited partnership to go ahead and set up the LLC. Sometimes they can happen simultaneously, but you do need the entity set up in order to apply for the tax ID. And the tax ID, especially for Canadians, the EIN, employer identification number, can be the sticking point. We have been much more successful of late at getting these turned around much more quickly. During COVID and right in the aftermath of COVID, it was taking upwards of a month or more. And now we're down to like a couple of days. If you happen to have a colleague or sister or brother or mother or father or somebody in the US with a social that is in some way connected to you, then you can get it online in 5 minutes.
That's fast.
That's what, when I get an EIN, it doesn't even take 5 minutes, right, Zach? It's like,
Wow.
you put the info in, it's literally instantaneous. So 5 minutes was just to put all the info in and make sure you have the right address or
Right.
whatever, but it's super fast. So if you have access to somebody that's willing, they don't have to be an owner of the company. It can just be somebody that's willing to have you use their social. If you don't want it to be some stranger, and they're not going to let you, but if you do have a sister, brother, mother, father, whatever, kid, whatever, there's opportunities, and that is instantaneous.
Absolutely. And so let's move on to Mike and Leanne with a question from the audience. Referring to your strategy, anything learned on long term that you can pass along to the newbie? Any secrets? The audience is looking for the secret sauce.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll run it. So when we launched in the US, we did a lot of research. We were a little overwhelmed. We actually reached out. It wasn't Zach. We hadn't known Zach at the time, but we used a turnkey provider for a couple of our first properties. Could I have saved a couple $1,000s maybe, because I wasn't using a turnkey? Maybe. Did somebody kind of hold our hand and guide us through and get us started and make sure that we were correct? Yes. So, you know what? Again, it comes down to, people will talk about, oh, I want to save money. I want to do it the cheapest way. It doesn't always mean it's the best way. There's experts out there who do this all the time. So, why not reach out to them and see, what they can offer and how they can help you. Now we're set up. Now we're using professionals like Laura. And, we've already just been chatting in the background with Zach. We already want to get in touch with Zach and look and see what his company offers. Because we have a lot of people saying, how do I do this? Here's some steps, but, let me take you by the hand and let me walk you through and teach you how to do it. And then, you can roll with it.
And I always say the money you save now because you want to do it yourself because you know better and you think you can do this. This is money that you're gonna spend later on other things, whether it's taxes, a tenant that you've placed ruined your place and you have depreciation now, or anything that can go wrong. The money you saved in the beginning because you were stubborn, thinking that you know better, anyway, it's gonna go away later. And I'm gonna conclude. I'm gonna wrap it up with a question for me. So if we were to finance at current rates, what is the time frame you can refinance at a lower rate? Because of that environment of where we are, higher rate environment, we came up with the prepayment penalty and new prepayment penalty structure of the default at no cost 5-year step down. And that's for investors that are looking more on the long term. And then you have for 1 point, you have a 3-year step down if you are doing your numbers for, let's say, the next 3 years. And then if you're going in right now and you believe that interest rates will go down, let's say 2025, they're going to stabilize again at mid-5s, for example, and you really believe in that, then go with the higher rate and don't put the money down on the mortgage points, but put the 2 points on non-prepayment penalty, and then you're free to refinance whenever the rates are going down. So this is my answer. Let me check. Maybe there is Anything else?
Michal, I'm so
Here,
sorry.
no.
Yeah, thank you.
We have to wrap it up. People need to move forward with their day. I'm going to thank you all. We have on our screen the information for the audience to contact you guys if you want to reach out to Lendai. These will be your point of contact. Depends where you want to go. And thank you all for joining. It was such a fun day at work today. I appreciate it.
Stay warm, Michal.
Thanks for putting this together. This is a great
Thank
topic
you.
to cover with everyone. We're looking forward to working with everybody.
Thank you
happy
guys, and thank you for
2023.
our audience. Thank you, Miles and Tammy, and everyone in the back. We'll see you soon.